Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. We've been talking about making games that use text input instead of hyperlinks which the player clicks, and I'm going to continue that in this video, and specifically I'm going to talk about a way to make using items a little bit easier and more intuitive. And first, I'm going to demonstrate a problem with how we've set up the game so far. So we're in this location. We can see a book, the computer tells us, and we think, I want to read what's in the book. So we type read book, and we don't get any result. We just get a what do you want to use. And the reason we get that is because the way we've set it up so far, when you try to use an item, including whether you enter use or whether you enter something specific like read or eat if it was food or something like that, the way we've set it up so far is that it looks in the inventory of what items the player has to see if that item is in there, and if it isn't, if you've tried to use an item that you don't have, then it will give you a message saying essentially that it can't work, it can't do that, or it can't work out what you're trying to do. If we instead of having read book, if we'd said get book, and then we picked a book, and then we'd said read book, we get the result of reading the book, which is this message here. But if we just come across the book in a location and try to use it directly, then it will give us an error message. And that feels a little bit hair-splitty, a little bit unintuitive. Really, you would think that if you can see the item, the computer should be able to work out that's the one you want to use, and it should arrange for you to pick up the item. So what I'm going to do is show you the code to make that happen. So let's get out of that just for now, and I'll show you what I did. Now, this is sort of the old version that I've just run. So let's get into the new or the current version. This is what you will get if you download the files using the link in the description. And you can see that I've added a few extra. Oops, it's a little bit uneven. There we go. I've added a few extra pages that can be accessed from several different commands. So for example, this page, find item in inventory, if you follow the arrows backwards, you can see that it's accessed from the drop command and it's accessed from the use command. And that makes sense, because if you want to drop an item, well, first you have to have it, so it has to find the item in the inventory. And if you want to use the item, well, you should also have the item, so it should be in there as use should refer to it as well. And similarly, find item in text, which means find item in the command that the player has entered, that is accessed from 3 different places, and so on. And as a result, I've had to sort of standardize the variables that these different pages use, so that if I get a $V from this item, well, both of those ought to refer to $V and not $Z, for example. And then if this calls $V the item in the inventory, this shouldn't call $V something else, because then we'll have difficulty using both of the routines at once. Some of the commands will use more than one routine now, and so I've had to standardize the variable. So instead of just using Z, X, and Y fairly randomly, I've decided that S is always, or $S rather, is always going to refer to the number of a slot in the player's inventory, whether it be an empty slot or whether it be a slot with an item in it. It's always going to be $S. And similarly, $W, standing for, I suppose, which item. I obviously would have preferred $I, but there already is a $I in the game. $W is going to be the number of the item that we're either looking for or have found. And that way, when we refer to one of these little subroutines and then later refer to another, we can be sure that the variables are always going to mean the same thing, and it minimises the chance of sort of accidentally changing a variable that we need. So let's get into what I've changed about use, which is going to be the main focus of this, this video. So I'll go through this. I won't go through the whole code because I have talked about use. I'm only going to talk about the changes. So we look for a reference to an item. If we can't find a reference to an item, then the computer is unable to do anything else, and it just gives a sort of error message or a message saying that we're not sure what to do. Otherwise, well, we can find an item. We found a reference to an item in the command. Well, the next step is, can we find the item in the inventory? And if it couldn't, if this variable was 0, previously what would happen is that it would just give it would give this same error message and take you back to the input. But we want to deal with the case where the player doesn't have the item that they're referring to, but the item is in the room. So we're going to make the change in this bit of code, in the code that refers to the situation in which we can't find the item in the inventory. So the first thing we're going to say is, well, is $I, square bracket, $W, n square bracket 2, n square bracket, equal to, which is the two equal signs, $L. Now, $L is the player character's current location, and $I something 2 is referring to this array here, this array which deals with the items in the game, where the first number is the number of the item, and then the second number is what it's telling you about the item. So 0 is the short name for the item, 1 is the long name for the item, sort of long description of the item, and 2 is the location of the item. So when we refer to $I, $W2, we're talking about the location of item number $W. So in other words, this if $L, $W2 equals $L is saying, in effect, if the item that we're talking about is in the room, then do what essentially do all this code. If the item isn't in the room, then we just get an error message, because in that case the player has said that they want to use an item which they don't have and which isn't in the room, and that obviously can't happen. So we just have to give them an error message and have them enter something else. So the code that's most important is this is within this this if. So the item isn't in the backpack, but is in the room. So first of all, we find an empty slot, which does what it says. I'll just look at that briefly. We have $S equal to 0. We have a for loop which starts at 1 and goes up to $M, which is the maximum number of items that the player can carry. And if $B, $Z is equal to 0. $B stands for backpack, and it's the array that keeps track of what the player is carrying. It's either a number, in which case it refers to the number of the item in the $I array, or it's 0, indicating a sort of empty slot, a free slot. What can I say? The opportunity to take another item. And the player starts with all of them equal to 0, and then it presumably fills up during the game as they find different items. So if we find a slot that is empty, then we set $S equal to that slot, and then we will return from that that include with either S equal to 0, which means there are no empty slots, in which case we say, well, your hands are too full and you'll need to put something down, and go back to input, and presumably the player will drop something that they have and then pick up the item they want to use, or drop an item they have and then enter use. Or there is a spare slot, in which case we take the item, which works the same as if they had entered the command take or get, and then we go to use 2. And use 2 is just dealing with the different possibilities of using the items in the game, which I've already dealt with. So the important thing is that if we get a command like use, or one of the other commands that is similar, like read or eat or something, which eventually will end up in use, as I've dealt with before. If we do that, look, and if we can find an item in the command that the player has entered, then we look for that item in the inventory. But if the item isn't in the inventory, then we check if it's in the room, and if it is in the room, we check if the player can take it, and if the player can take it, which means if they have a spare slot in their inventory, then we allow them to take it, and then we allow them to use it. And that will seem a lot more natural and a lot less fiddly. So let me just briefly show you what that will look like. So we're in here and we say read book, and this time, instead of getting an error message, we should get the message that we get when we read the book. And we also should find, because we now can't see any items of interest, whereas before it said there was a book in the room, and the reason for that is because, of course, we've taken the book, and the proof of that is that if we look in inventory, we can see that the book is one of the things in fact, is the only thing in our inventory. So, and that seems a little bit more natural and easy and sort of instinctive to me than if trying to use an item that was in the room got us an error because we had to sort of get it first. And that's one way to make the experience of playing the game a little bit smoother and less sort of fiddly and difficult in a not fun way. So I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.